our webinar on the rising cost of marketing print presented by SunDance Solutions Group, and we want to thank everybody for joining us. We'll be recording this to share with some of our contacts, so we just want to let everybody know that we will be recording this. So this webinar lasts no more than 30 minutes, and in that time we're going to share with you all some strategies that you can use to minimize the impact of the rising cost of print. So we want to let you know why we're running this webinar. We have seen the costs go up on so many things in the last 12 months, and marketing print and services is no different. We at SunDance Solutions Groups are all about helping our clients get great value for money, and so we feel it is our responsibility to do what we can to help and advise our customers to do whatever they can to reduce the impact. The last 12 months, we have seen a perfect storm of paper shortages, labor shortages, and general inflation all come together at the same time. In the worst case, companies cannot get their supplies at all, and if they can, the price is so much higher than it was a year ago. There really is no magic wand to make these increases go away, but the good news is that there are things you can do to minimize the effects, and this is what we will share with you during the next half hour. So if you've got any questions, raise your hand or ask them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. We want this to kind of be, if anything comes up, we want to be a resource. So I will hand this over to my colleague Simon, who will take you through some of these strategies. If you've got any questions, let us know. But Simon, it is all you.
Great, thank you, Thomas. I'm just waiting for the next slide to click over. Okay, right. Welcome everyone. Thank you for that intro, Thomas. So we're going to do our best to keep this just down to around 20 minutes. So it's designed to be a quick, fast sharing of information with the audience here. So what we're going to cover in the next 20 minutes we're going to talk about some of the key challenges that we've all seen in 2022 and the perfect storm that, that Thomas was just describing a few moments ago. And we want to share with you what we think are some of those main causes, what's causing these problems. But more importantly, what we want to do is to share with you our best ideas about what you can do to minimize the effects. And as Thomas said, there is no magic wand. Prices are going up. We're looking at US inflation of around 9% at the moment. But the good news is there are things that you can do to minimize that effects. Just basically take a more strategic approach to how you buy your print. And we're going to come on to some of the details on what that looks like very shortly. And really within that strategy, we're going to share with you what we believe you can build into that strategy to make sure that you continue to get good value through the next 12, maybe even 24 months until the market starts to settle down again. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some of the benefits of taking that approach. Okay, just a little bit about me, without going into too much detail. I've been in the industry for about 18 years. And I've spent half of my career on the purchasing side of the table and the other half of my career on the selling side of the table. So I kind of look at this situation in terms of where is the value. And right now, what I've seen is that the customers that buy print need to find a way of getting better value. So I've worked with companies to train them to buy more strategically. And I've also helped suppliers to put their prices up, which some of you guys may not want to hear. But overall, it's about value within this marketplace right now. I've seen companies buy print well, and I've seen companies buy print very badly. And those that buy badly can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars more than they probably should have done. So,
and in the past, they could get away with that, buying print bad, and that's just not saying that it's wrong, but in the you've seen people do that and have success.
I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, well, you're right, Thomas, and you're right. It doesn't get noticed because nobody knows. Nobody really knows. No one notices. The only reason everyone notices now is because all the prices are going up. They're all going one way. But no, it's a very good point. No one really notices. So that's enough about me.
Here we go. Overview.
So a little bit about us as SunDance. We're a solutions provider. We're also a significant manufacturer of print as well. So we have a pretty substantial manufacturing facility. But we buy print on behalf of our clients. We supply services that include design, artwork, app development, and all of the things that you can see on the slide there. And as a solutions provider, it's our responsibility to help our clients to get value for money. And this is why we decided a couple of months ago we would bring something together to address these inflationary issues we're seeing right now, because, as Thomas mentioned earlier, it's our responsibility to do that. And it's our responsibility to share our best advice with our customers and prospective customers to minimize these terrible effects of inflation right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a quick look at what the challenges are. Kind of fourfold, really. This is the perfect storm that we're looking at. We're seeing a shortage of paper, and this is a really big problem in the US right now. And it's no great surprise that when you have a shortage of something, the price of it tends to increase. That's kind of what you see in a capitalist market. And we've also seen labor cost increases, largely caused by the pandemic and money being distributed differently across the public. And then to a lesser degree, we're also seeing energy cost increase as well. But if all of these things come together as they have done in the last few months, the effect on the customer, you guys, is pretty much twofold. You either have a risk to the security of your supply, or you have a price increase. And in many cases, you may be facing both. So that's why we're here today, to share with you our thoughts on what potentially can be done.
In the past, there used to be one of those, there would be a labor shortage, there'd be an energy, that would happen maybe one at a time, and you would, adjust. But now it's like,
All
the
at once.
perfect storm. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all of
absolutely.
them at once. So
Yeah.
it's extremely timely.
And being in Florida, we know all about perfect storms, don't we? So
Exactly. Yeah. No, hurricane season starts on June 1st, so we'll be ready.
So let's sort of drill down into some of that and look at what causes it. There's a number of things coming into play here. None of this, of course, is within our control, but the price of paper pulp globally has increased over the last 12 months. And in addition to that, particularly in the Western market, capacity has been removed. And by capacity, I mean the paper production plants, the paper mills, and certainly that's the case in the US too, as the Western world has chosen to purchase, I'm going to call it cheaper material, lower cost material from the Far East. And in doing so, we've allowed our manufacturing capacity to drop over time. And that's now coming back to bite us, I believe. That's my personal view.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I certainly didn't foresee, and anybody that I speak to doesn't foresee this either, which I never foresaw this, was with the huge increase in online shopping through the likes of Amazon and what have you over the last 2 years, there's been a massive surge in the demand for cardboard boxes, which when you think about it, makes perfect sense. But what's happened within the finite supplies of the pulp industry is that pulp has been diverted into cardboard box production instead of historically what would have been paper production. So that's also exacerbated our shortage of printing paper. And then, of course, the pandemic has caused a number of people to rethink their work-life balance, the job that they do, the distance they travel to work, and all those things. And that has prompted people to in the US, we call it great reshuffle. I know in the UK, they call it the great resignation. But people are basically leaving their jobs to try different things. And this has exacerbated our labor shortages. And again, like anything else, when there's a shortage of something, the price goes up. So when there's a shortage of labor, the wage costs increase. So all of this is compacting our story of inflation. And I suppose my own personal view here is that this has just been a huge reminder for myself and for all of us that the global supply chain was such a finely balanced machine that we just took for granted.
Well connected.
Completely connected. The demand is matched against the supply, and there aren't any spikes in price. There's no price gouging, and everything just worked so well across continents and across countries. Amazing that it actually got to that stage. And now that it's no longer there, we're suffering the effects of that. So these are the main causes, and to a lesser degree, certainly here in the US, a lesser degree, energy costs are rising slightly in the US. In Europe, it's going crazy right now, but hopefully that won't affect us too much if we're not buying much from Europe. Okay, so those are the main causes. That's certainly what we think.
Strategy.
So now it's okay. So what do we do? So it's a little bit of procurement theory, if you like. It doesn't just apply to print, but of course it absolutely does, which is when you have lots of availability and lots of supply capacity, the price of that supply or product tends to drop because there's more of it. There's more competition. and there's more ability for customers to shop around. So any of you guys right now that have been buying print for some years, you will probably, many of you have just taken the approach that you'll spot purchase from suppliers. You'll get 3 or 4 quotes. You'll probably pick one of the lowest prices you get, probably. You may well benchmark your suppliers, and you'll run tenders to make sure that you keep the price nice and sharp, and that you're taking advantage of a supply market that has plenty of availability.
If we need it, it'll be there. Oh yes.
Always there, always
Yeah.
there, and there's always a supplier willing to just do it a few percent lower than somebody
Yeah.
else. We've seen, I mean, Thomas, you and I have seen that for years, haven't we?
Yes.
You know, there's always someone willing to undercut, even if they don't make much money out of it. You know, there's always someone, and a savvy customer can take advantage of that. All works fine. But when availability and capacity drops, that freedom for the customer diminishes. So you may find you try and go for 3 or 4 prices, go to the same suppliers. You might find some of those suppliers can no longer get the material that you want, and if they can't get the material, they can't supply you. So so what we're saying here now really is that when availability and capacity drops, it's time to get a strategy in place, because that strategy will help to protect your business from a supply but also a cost control point of view. So what we want to do now is just to share with you what that strategy could look like. So the options here are, there are 2 options, which we showed on that graph a few moments ago, which is you can spot buy. Okay, so you can just go to the marketplace and get the cheapest price and just place the order. So, but the risk there is the prices are likely to be higher for the reasons we've just been talking about over the last 10 minutes. There is no cost control, because the busy suppliers will charge you more because they're busy, and the quieter suppliers may well charge you less, but they may not be able to get the paper. So that kind of limits that strategy straight away. Now, print suppliers will have more control in this situation because they know how much the prices are going up by. And in my experience, suppliers know much more than their customers do about the economics of what they supply. So there are risks associated with spot buying right now in this marketplace. The reward, of course, if you get it right, is you don't have to commit to anybody. You can buy from whoever you like, and you still have the freedom to shop around, provided that the risks that I just mentioned are being managed. But then let's have a look at more of a strategic approach. So let's have a look at the risks of a strategic approach, which is this will take more benefit on more effort on your part to engage with a smaller number of suppliers. It will take more effort, for sure.
More work?
More work. Yeah, I'm afraid so. It's really easy, isn't it, to go to the marketplace and send out 3 quotes.
Oh,
send
yeah.
out 3 quotes. Eeny, meeny, miny, you know, pick the cheapest price, place the order. Nice and easy. This takes more effort from a procurement point of view, and it takes more effort from the marketeer's point of view. So there's commitment that needs to come into this place now, because if you build a strategic relationship with a supplier, there are a number of rewards that can come from that relationship. Firstly, your supplier will do their level best to make sure they have your paper available for when you need it. So if you suddenly need 3 million catalogs to be printed, as long as your supplier knows about it in advance and they trust you and you have a relationship with them, they'll go get that paper for you and put it on the shelf. Whereas your spot suppliers will probably not want to do that. You'll get greater control of costs, and we'll come on to what that looks like shortly. There will absolutely be more supplier customer loyalty because there's a strategic relationship in place. And working with a chosen supplier in the right strategic manner will help both companies to work out what this inflationary impact really looks like. And this is where your costs can then be controlled, because you're accepting that prices are going to go up, but you'll have a measure as to being able to know by how much. And then the beauty of all of this is when paper prices drop, and they will at some point, you will know how to track your prices back down again to where they should be. So there's a lot of things there, a lot of benefits there from having a strategic approach rather than a transient spot buy purchasing.
And the strategic approach, that'll set you up for the long term. It's when things go back, you're in a better position.
Yes.
Than when you were before.
It may well be, it may well be that in 2 years, when everything's calmed down again, let's hope it is 2 years, you might decide that you don't want a strategic approach anymore. You might want to go back to a tactical spot buy
Yeah.
approach. That's absolutely fine. But we're talking about the right here and the right now, and what can be done. Okay, Thomas, have we had any questions lining up yet on?
Let me check the chat. Anybody, if you've got any questions, I'm monitoring the chat. Simon, I don't see anything. I'll keep watching it.
Okay.
And if you've got any questions, raise your hands. But
Okay. Right,
no
great.
hands and no questions in
Okay,
the
right.
chat.
So we're good to push on. Okay, so we've started to speak now about a strategic approach and what that should or could look like. So there's a few things here that we've listed on there, and I'm just going to pick on some of the key ones. The first one is set up a contractual agreement with your vendor. Pick a vendor that you like, that knows you, and make a decision on who your preferred supplier or suppliers are. We're advocating having just one. You might choose to have two, but my recommendation would be don't cast your net too wide, because the narrower you cast your nets, the more buy-in your vendor's going to give you back, the more loyalty there's going to be. Now, as part of this relationship, you're going to ask your chosen vendor to do certain things. Primarily, you're going to ask them to buy material ahead of time for you, so that whenever you want new products coming through, your supplier is there ready with material. So if you've got a preferred supplier and they're not financially stable, you may still have a problem. So check number one. I know this is pretty basic to procurement guys that are on the call, but you check your vendor is financially stable, because otherwise there's little
That's part
point
of the
in
process.
building a relationship with them. And then once you've got that in place, then you have the mechanism to say, okay, we know that prices are going to change because of the prices of raw material. So we are going to set and agree a baseline for that paper. So that might be a market price per ton for a certain product, for example, but that needs to be part of the agreement, because that's your datum point. So that when prices moving up or move down, you can track the effect on the prices that you pay. And then once you've done that, then the next thing is to agree a formula for how the paper cost increases is reflected in the product price that you pay. So in round terms, you might agree with your supplier on a range of items that the paper costs represents 50% of the selling price to you. So then in round terms, if paper goes up by 6%, you know that you can expect to pay no more than 3% on your product price. Dead easy. Couldn't be more simple than that. And if you agree that with your supplier, it stops your supplier putting the price up by 7% because they think you won't notice. So it's about getting some commercial rules in place. And then with that mechanism in place, when the paper prices do drop, you can track that back down again. So you can then say to your contracted supplier, well, I see the prices have dropped by 3%. So your selling price to me should drop by 1.5%. That's right, isn't it? And the supplier will agree to that, because that's what you've agreed in the contract. So hopefully what I'm building a picture of here is how the contract can work for both parties. And it's about security. It's not about one company trying to get ahead of the other. It's about both parties being protected from these market conditions.
Working together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's that's the beauty of any strategic partnership with any vendor and customer. So then you come on to, okay, so what do I need to do to govern this relationship? So things like forecasting your requirements. You need to share that with your supplier so they can have plenty of forecast to go and get the material you need them to get on your behalf. And then what I would always advocate here is agree what that stock is, because if you're going to be good enough to sign a contract with them, they need to do their part. So I would always say agree what stock they're going to hold and check that they are holding it for you. Now, another thing you can do, of course, when we're facing such stiff percentage increases in inflation right now, is what you can do is say, okay, we know that prices are going to increase. We don't want you to charge us more than you should for inflation. So we're going to agree that we will pay you an inflation level, which is linked to the retail price index. But what I would always advocate is if you're going to be good enough to do that with your vendor, you should be saying something like, we'll pay you an RPI increase, but we'll pay you an RPI increase less maybe 1%, maybe even less 2%. Why would the supplier do that? Well, they're still getting an increase from you without having to fight for it. So the supplier should see benefit in that, but equally you as a buyer should also demands some benefit for taking that approach with inflation. Now, one of the other things you can do with your supplier is say, okay, well, look, we've agreed to a 1% RPI less 1%, but if we give you some design work, maybe we could ask you to handle some of our warehousing, for example, and we give you more added value business, we would like that 1% discount to become 2%, or we'd like our 2% to become a 3% discount. So you can use other services that you could put with your vendor to negotiate a better deal. And I would always advocate do that. And in my experience, most suppliers are really accepting of that kind of approach. Couple of things now, really, which is based on performance, which applies to any supply contract, which was set your service level agreements with your supplier. Things like paper holding, people like the value, things like the value of the paper they're going to hold, the lead times they're going to supply you, and so on. And then make sure that you put in good KPI reporting so that you can track that performance. Now that's just standard contractual stuff.
The KPI, that's critical. You got to have that. Yep.
And your vendor should do that for you. All you need to do is tell them what you need, show them the format that you need, and your vendor will do that for you.
Yeah.
So that's what we're advocating should be a good, healthy, mutually beneficial strategic approach right now in these terrible market conditions. So a bit of a checklist there. So set up your agreement, select your supplier, check they're stable, be open is what I would always recommend. Be open and tell the supplier what it is that you want to get from this contractual relationship, what you expect, and what you expect of them as a vendor. But also be clear what you can offer them back, so that they can also see the value in that. You'd want to decide on a suitable term. You might choose 2 years right now. I don't see any point in choosing one. And then finally draw up a detailed contract with that vendor and execute it. Okay, so
what's included in your contract?
I wouldn't go producing a 60-page document. In truth, no one's ever going to read anything that large. Keep it simple would be our suggestion. Agree the baseline of your paper stocks. Agree where they take their data source from the price of paper, because there are lots of different pieces of news out there. You know, if it's $800 a ton and another publication says it's 900, you don't want to get into arguments about where that information comes from. So just agree with your supplier what index you're going to use and stick to it. Keep the formula simple. 50%, for example, 6% on paper means 3% on your product price. It couldn't be more simple than that. If you buy regular items, I would build a price matrix. If it's standard brochures that you buy time and time again, even on different quantities, get a price matrix in place, because then you know where you stand. And then if there are paper increases, that matrix can be very quickly updated and it will give you the feeling of good control, which is critical. Moving through there, agree a procedure for how you're going to forecast the paper and how you're going to measure that your supplier is in fact stocking it for you. And service level agreements we've already touched on. So those
and we'll send this deck out to everybody. We'll make sure this is available. We've got a lot of this on our website, and so yeah, we'll make sure that if you need this to pass on to anybody else, we'll provide it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think we're coming pretty much to the end, Thomas.
The benefits.
Just the benefits. Okay. And I don't think any of these will surprise you, as we've already sort of mentioned them on the way through over the last 20 minutes. But in essence, the prices are going to go up in the short term. But if you have a contractual arrangement in place, you will know by how much and you will know why. So you won't feel like you're stabbing in the dark. You won't feel as though somebody's price gouging you. You will feel as though you have control, because you have control of the main elements. And then when prices do drop, you'll be able to track your prices back down again. Because in a price reduction market, this is where suppliers can make their money. Make no bones about that. And I know, because I've been on the supply side doing that in the past. It's easy to make money on a downward market as it is on an upward market if you know what you're doing and you know more than the people that are buying from you. So that's a bit of a supplier's view there, but something to be careful of.
I think that's critical. Yeah, you've seen both, and so Yep.
Yep. And suppliers can make money in a downward market for sure. You'll have more security of supply of your materials for sure, because your vendor will be stocking material for you, and they'll be more loyal. So if all of a sudden you say to your vendor, you know, we've kind of dropped the ball here, and we need you to break down a press for 3 days to produce something urgently for us. If you have a relationship with that vendor and a contract in place, they are more likely to jump through whatever hoops you throw at them.
Glad to do it. Yep.
They will help you out. They will help, and they always will.
Yeah.
RPI increases, inflation is going to happen. It already is, but at least you can control to make sure you're not paying more than inflation. You'll get far better budgetary forecasting. You are going to pay more, but at least you're going to know roughly how much more you're going to pay. And then there's a whole list of other things which I'm just going to describe as closer partnership with your vendor. We'll deliver a whole host of other benefits and service benefits, as it becomes more of a partnership between supplier and customer.
We could do a whole webinar on that, just that partnership and the values. And so maybe we're going to be doing some more of these webinars, so that stay tuned. That might be our next one.
Yeah, maybe it's a good idea. So,
all right.
Well, I hope that's been of help to everyone. It's just a really honest sharing of our views. We just feel like as we said earlier, we just feel like we need to do something, and it's right that we just share our views, because some of these things will save you a lot of money if you get these things right.
Hey, perfect, Simon. Thank you for sharing that. We've got a couple questions. I've got one. If I contract with a supplier, will I pay more?
Okay, that's a good question. So I guess what they're thinking is, if I shop around, I'll always get lowest price, I'm guessing. So if I put all my eggs in one basket, if they do that, will they pay more? I don't believe so, if you follow these simple rules that we've shared over the last 20 minutes, because the rules basically will help you to make sure that you know where the cost increases are coming from, and you shouldn't pay more. I mean, prices drop, things like paper, you will start to pay less again, because you know how much your prices should drop by. Whereas if you continue to spot buy, what I think is going to happen is the suppliers that can get the paper will be really busy, and the suppliers that can't get the paper will not be busy. So the suppliers that can't get the paper will give you a really low price, but you may not get the product. But the suppliers that are really busy will not give you a cheap price, because you don't have a relationship with them. And printers historically price high when they're busy, and they price low when they're quiet. So spot buying in this climate almost forced you to pay more money than you should, not less. So I hope that answers that question.
That was good. I think that was the question. And the other question, do we got a magic ball? When will paper be back in stock? Do we got any forecast? That's the other question. Any idea?
No, well, I don't personally. I mean, we've just watched it. We were hoping things would get better. I mean, we at SunDance have put in about another $1 million of this paper stock in the last 3 or 4 months, just to protect our clients, our contracted clients. And in truth, not all companies can do that. So we're a financially stable business, and we can afford to do that. Some companies do not have the cash or the leverage with their vendors to be able to do that. How long is it going to last? We just don't know. We are seeing 1 or 2 paper mills being reopened and taken out of mothballs in the US. But you know what? That's just going to take time to filter through, and probably that's just scratching the surface, because the US still continues to import paper from Europe, paper from Asia, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. And while they're importing from Europe and Asia, they're also competing with stock shortages in those countries too.
Hey, perfect. I think that's all the questions. If anybody has any other questions, send them over. Our contact information's here. We'll get the slide deck generated. But send them over to the email there, thomas.calvert@SundanceUSA, if anything comes up, and we'll be happy to answer them. But we appreciate everybody joining us today, and thank you so much.
Right. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Have a good day. Still recording?